timely relative of mine. So the question, a relative of mine is currently a student by SMC. Among other proclamations by her professors, while going over permitted sources, the Time magazine was not a good source because it was recently purchased by a conglomerate with conservative leanings. On the list of recommended sources were, amongst others, The Atlantic, the New York Times, and the LA Times. Other comments have included gender roles and have disproved, and most academics hold that the Bible was fallible, so best not to use it as a source. Aside from being smart and not anachronistic, professors, in order to get good grades, what can be done to make shift in this awful state of affairs where conservative and or religious students are constantly derided?
And so I think that number one, what I've said to many students at college campuses is don't lose your grade to make a point, because then you're handing power to the person who wants to wield it against you anyway. So it's one thing to have conversations with folks outside of class. Some professors are fine with having conversations in class. But if you are going to school and the professor obviously is not interested in what you have to say, then why bother? Just give the professor what they want, get your A, leave. That's always been my strategy, and it seems to have worked pretty well. So that said, I think that one of the ways that you become a stronger thinker is by taking into account what the other side thinks on all these issues. And so I've read a lot of biblical criticism. I've read a lot of the kind of postmodern deconstructions of the Bible. I read all this stuff not only so that I know how to respond to it, because sometimes you learn from it. Sometimes it makes you think about things that you haven't thought about before. And there is some flexibility in philosophy in Judaism. What's really interesting about Judaism, the more I study, the more I find, is that Judaism is such a halachically based religion, but there's not a ton of hashkafa, right? The amount of hashkafa, the amount of philosophy in Judaism is actually relatively limited because the Bible was supposed to be the philosophy. It wasn't supposed to be like there was a separate philosophy like Aristotle or Plato. The Bible was the whole thing. It was the whole deal. It's really very rare to find somebody who tries to merge philosophy with Judaism, which is why Rambam is sort of an anachronism in that way. But the struggle to relate the Chumash and the Torah, to relate Tanakh to sort of secular modern developments is an ongoing struggle, and to pretend that it's not a struggle is foolish. I like to acknowledge all of these problems so that we can honestly deal with them, as opposed to pretending that these questions don't exist and that we can just take everything at face value. So what I would recommend is that you read everything they have to say, and then you look for the opposition point and you see which one you find more convincing. So I'm an evidence-based guy. I think you have to take certain things on faith. I think it's going to be disprovable, for example. I don't think it is provable. Like, I know there's a Kuzari attempt to prove that revelation on Sinai was real. I don't think it's utterly unconvincing. I don't find it supremely convincing. I think there are just certain things you have to take on faith. And the best proof to me of the reality of Judaism is the fact that only one civilization in the history of the world has created modernity, and that civilization started with Judaism.